Hey everybody, I'm Shea from Method Vans, and today I'm excited to showcase to you one feature that we put in every one of our ultra premium builds. And today we wanted to take the time to highlight and take you through some of the detail of what makes this product exceptional. This is our electrical assembly cabinet that we put in our builds. And as you'll see right off the hop, this thing is beautiful. Not only is the fabrication and design beautiful, the finish on it is exceptional. The quality of the componentry, as you'll see, is predominantly Victron Energy. Everything has been meticulously placed and laid out and designed to have clearances for doors, to make sure that every single component can be removed easily if there was a failure and we need to replace a component. And everything has been meticulously placed so that you end up with a product that looks like this. This is now at a stage where we will begin wiring all of the items in. But before we get into the wiring, I didn't want to have all the wiring in place because it gets really busy. And so I wanted to kind of showcase just how everything's laid out, what are the components inside of here, and what makes this, structure and this cabinet assembly so magnificent in our builds. Up till now, this has been exclusively used in our builds. You've only been able to have this in your van if you bought an ultra premium build from us. But we are excited to be releasing this product to the general public, whether you are a DIY, whether you are a professional builder. This product will get you steps ahead in a real hurry. And there'll be some options in how this will be configured in terms of, do you get it like this? Do you get it fully wired? Do you have the secondary alternator control or not? And things like that. So there will be some options, but it will be very similar to what you're seeing right now. So let me take you through a little bit of the detail of what is inside this cabinet, how we construct it, everything about it that's important that makes it unique. First of all, the entire structure of the cabinet is made out of aluminum, which is nice because it's nice lightweight. It ends up still being a very heavy piece because of the batteries and the multiplus and all the wiring that goes in is very heavy. So, it becomes a very heavy piece, but we want to try to have as light as possible. And so aluminum obviously does that for us. As you can see, we have just beautiful fabrication throughout the entire cabinet. And it's not just the welding, it is the design that makes this piece exceptional. We have created this to obviously go in the garage of our builds. And our garages, I guess, to me, are probably one of the best parts of our builds. We have probably the largest garage space in any build that I've ever seen. With a very large slider, full extension slider. We've maximized every single square inch inside that garage. So you can put up to 4 big mountain bikes, 2 mountain bikes and lots of totes. Storage is the number one thing that most people want in these builds. And it's often forgotten or underestimated how important storage is. And so everything needs to be as tight and clean and precise as possible to make the overall product and the storage in the van to the best it can be. So we've got our structural cabinet to start, and you'll see clearly here we have the cutout for the wheel well. So the wheel well will actually be penetrating inside the cabinet. You can see that's why there's this gap in here. And then every component that is now placed into the cabinet has been drilled and tapped for threading and meticulously attached. And in doing that, that is somewhat of a time painful process. To drill and tap every single hole in the attachment of all these pieces takes a lot of time. So this is not a rushed project. This is a day and day project that takes time. And we're not even at the wiring stage, which then is the next sort of level. But let me take you through some of the componentry, and then I'll take you for a little bit of walk around of how beautiful the cabinet is and how everything kind of lays out. So you'll see first, you'll see these two brush plates. Just ignore this wiring here from the S-Pod. These two brush plates. Again, we just don't jab wires through into the box. That is not pretty. That is not to the level of which we do our builds. So a brush plate like this, you can see, will completely hide all of those wiring coming in from our walls. So our wall panels in our vans have these two exact locations where we're bringing wiring through. It's not random. It's strategic and strategized on how everything is coming through the van wall. So in this case, we have two entrances into this cabinet. We have the brush plate. So there's two of the brush plates. So that's the first entrance. We have our high voltage and our low voltage coming through these plates. And then coming from the underside of this cabinet, we will have a marine grade port in the floor of the van, and coming out of there will be our primarily our wiring for our secondary alternator, our controller for our secondary alternator, you know, an outside temperature probe and things like that. Those come through the bottom of this cabinet. They will come right up through this track or this panduit tracking for concealing, and then they will tie in. So those are our kind of two component or two areas in which we bring stuff into the cabinet from the van. So if you were to purchase this from us, we would give you these two locations precisely, so you knew where to put those in your wall. We would tell you where you put this port in your floor, and there's flexibility because this is fairly long through here. And then honestly, once those things are in place, you would have this, you would place this in the van, you would do a little bit of final wiring if you got it with it pre-wired, and you'd be off to the races, and you would save yourself a tremendous amount of time, and you would end up with what we consider like an ultra premium, the highest quality product that could go in your van. This would be on the professional level of any of the best builders in the market. So taking it back to kind of highlight through the componentry that we have inside of the cabinet. Obviously, you'll see a lot of blue, and blue is the Victron. Particularly, we start with our base, and our base is our battery system. So what we have here is we have two 330 amp hour 12.8 volt lithium ion batteries from Victron Energy. Each of them is around 4.25 watt hours, kilowatt hours. So we end up with about 8.5 kilowatt hours. If you like kilowatt hours, if you like amp hours, we're ending up with 660 amp hours. These are beautiful batteries. They are connected or communicating through to the BMS. They have great longevity. They come with a lot of strong backing from Victron. They've been in the business a long time. They create exceptional products. They're out of the Netherlands, and you know they're pretty much our exclusive in our builds currently. Now, what we have here is our tray, which is our battery component tray. So this tray is bolted through to the cabinet. And then underneath the batteries, we start with a battery guard. So battery guard, this is a kind of a rubber silicone style matting that's at least a nice 1/2 inch thick. That matting takes away vibrations and absorptions as the bumps of the road and all the vibrations that we have as we're going down the road. All of those vibrations eventually deteriorate batteries. And so a battery guard, less with lithium, but still, it's still a factor. The battery guard takes away and dampens that, that vibrational sensation that we get through driving the van. It also gives a bit of a thermal break. So you can tell we've got, you know, metal here. This would be attached to the floor, but our floor, again, is somewhat insulated. So we're not metal on metal, but regardless, metal definitely conducts cold or the lack of heat quite quickly. So we want to have a bit of a thermal break to make sure that we're keeping these batteries as tempered as possible. Now, Victron doesn't do heated batteries. And if you live in Canada, so we're in Alberta, Canada, we have cold weather for 6-7 months of the year. So if you're going to use your van, aside from just the summer months, we need these batteries to be able to be charged. And lithium ion batteries do not charge around anything below around 4 degrees Celsius. So we need these batteries to maintain at a temperature so that they can be charged. So between the battery guard matting and the battery itself, we have a battery heater. And these battery heaters, you can see through the cabling here, will then come up and connect to this Smart Battery Protect, which will then get triggered from the from the multiplus or from the servo. In this case, the servo will control a temperature probe, which will then have a relay, which will then kick the batteries on to be heating when they need to be heating and not heating when they don't need to be heating, because they're using battery capacity to heat themselves, is how that works. So we call this, a full, heated battery system, in that the pads are generously heating the batteries themselves. With the thermal break in the battery guard, we're not getting a lot of loss of heat into the cabinet itself. These are attached with marine grade latching systems. These are rock solid in here. They are not going anywhere, and it's all through this battery tray, which is then bolted with 6 1/4-inch bolts into the base of the cabinet. So this is kind of the beast of our system. We have our batteries, and then from there, obviously, our batteries can do a whole bunch of things. So in our battery system, everything then will obviously be fused. So our main fuse for our battery system, a 400 amp fuse, will then come through, and this, as you can see, will come up perfectly through here to the negative, or the positive one will go through here up into the positive, and we use a very creative lug, a 90-degree lug, so that we get offset between the positive and the negative. So the positive one will come, it laces right down here, drops right through into here, into the blue C fuse, and then connecting into our batteries. Our negatives will then come and tie up through to the negative. So these are both connected through into our Lynx Smart BMS. So the Lynx Smart BMS is an intelligent piece that really kind of monitors the batteries. The batteries are connected to the Smart BMS, as well as other things are connected to the Smart BMS. Power comes into the Smart BMS, which again is our brains of our unit. That is then attached to a Lynx distributor, which is basically just a bus bar that has ability for fuses, although it does communicate to the Lynx through a data cable. All of our loads, our big loads, are going to be distributed through the Lynx. And then out of the Lynx, we have another negative bus bar, and we do that because we need a lot of attachment points for negatives. A lot of our positives are obviously being attached inside the distributor, as well as some negatives, but we need other places for negatives, so we have that. And then we do also need some other places for positives. So we have our positive bus bar up here. Now, the positive bus bar is not connected through in a direct run inside the distributor. It is going to be connected through a fuse into here to then give us a secondary power source within the cabinet. So all you can see, our Panduit tracking that we use here have all been cut out to allow for our wiring to go through. And if you're not familiar with the Panduit kind of tracking, it's beautiful. It works exceptionally well. It gives us lots of concealment of all of our wires. And then there is a finished cap that goes on top of here. So in the end of the day, you hardly see any wiring at all. We definitely see some, but we want to get away from that rat's nest of wiring that sometimes we'll see in other people's builds. Again, we're trying to just have an exceptional product at the end of the day. So from here, if we'll just pop over, we come and we have some other componentry here. We have a breaker box here, which has our solar, is kind of our solar disconnect, our solar in and our solar out, which we can turn on and off inside this breaker box. We have a breaker for our alternator regulator inside this box. And then we also have a breaker for our battery heating. So again, if we want in the summer to just turn the battery heating off, to have no risk of it coming on by mistake or having an issue, we can turn off the breaker. And that obviously then communicates through to the Smart Battery Protect, which will then monitor what's happening and the loads that are being drawn off of it to heat up the batteries. Below here we have our Smart Battery Protect for all of our DC loads, so our direct current loads, which is a 12-volt system. So all of that will be coming out of this Battery Protect. And again, we've got, you know, openings for all of our wiring inside and out of this. In addition to this negative bus bar, we have another negative bus bar, and these two will be attached together. And this just gives us, again, a bunch more connection points for you know, negative components. We end up with a lot of negative leads inside this system. So from there, we have our multi-plus. So this is a 3000 VA or 3000 watt multi-plus 2 12-volt system. This, again, is our battery charger as well as our inverter. So this will take 12-volt power, inverted up to 120 volt to give us our high voltage stuff in our van. So for our microwave, our induction cooktop, our water heater, those loads will be coming off of the multi-plus inverted side. And when we plug it into shore power will then get converted in from 120 down to the 12.8 volts to then recharge our battery systems and keep it up to a acceptable level. The brains of this system, there's two brains. Obviously, there's the BMS, which kind of is the brains of the battery system. And then the entire overall system is controlled by a Servo GX. This is the next generation Servo GX, which has a different interface. And we use a Touch 70 screen inside the build, as well as you can Bluetooth into the GX with your phone and see everything that's going on inside your system. We try to use all Victron because then everything inside the components or inside the cabinet or inside the van are all integrated and linked and all satisfied and communicated through the Servo GX. So we got all kinds of things happening in the Servo. We can put on temperature probes, so we can monitor the temperature in the cabinet that helps us to tell us when to turn the batteries on and off. We can put a temperature probe to the outside. We can put a temperature probe into our water cabinet. We can put tank sensors into this. So we actually, in our builds, we have an electronic tank sensor. So there's two float senders in our water tanks. One goes to the Servo GX, so we get a digital reading of our water level tank, and then we also have a mechanical water level gauge in the back of our water cabinet that, if you stick around long enough, you'll be able to get a chance to see that as well. So this communicates well with the Multi-Plus. It communicates with our Link Smart BMS. It basically gives us all of that connection. It then connects also to our solar MPPT, which I'll get to in a second. So again, it's really the brains of the whole operation, and everything that we're communicating or seeing is really a reflection of what comes out of this servo. Here you'll see a shunt, and this shunt is mounted inside the tracking, and we do that on purpose. One, so it's hidden, and two, it's a perfect path for us. So the shunt is monitored off the negative side of the system, and this shunt is specific for our secondary alternator. So all of our builds have a 280 amp secondary alternator that is going to recharge our system at very high rates when the van is running. So we'll typically see upwards of 220, 230 amps hitting our battery system while we're driving. And that is exceptional. You drive a couple hours and you can completely, recharge your entire bank. So the regulator that monitors and controls the alternator, which is a component over here, which I'll show you in a second, which is the wake speed, that likes a shunt to measure kind of high and low voltage coming off of the negative side of the system. So our negative coming out from underneath the van from the front of the van where the alternator is placed, the 4-aught cabling for the negative comes up, does a nice bend here, perfectly straight into the shunt. Off of the positive of the shunt will then come up into our negative of our links distributor. And then we have a high-low connection point, which then communicates with our regulator, and it helps to see what kind of draw is happening off of the alternator as the van is driving and as the batteries are absorbing that charge. Other componentry inside this cabinet, so I'll pop over here. Again, we have we have some Blue Sea small like fuse blade holders. One is needed for the BMS. One is needed for some small componentry inside the cabinet. For example, we have this cabinet is then thermostatically controlled with a ventilation fan. The ventilation fan is not in yet. It sits right here. I've done that on purpose right now so that you can have full visibility of the componentry. But we use a nice 12-volt cabinet fan that is then controlled via a temperature probe and tied into the Multiplus. So we use a relay on the Multiplus. So when the fan on the Multiplus kicks in, it also kicks in the fan to draw heat outside of the cabinet. Particularly in the summer months, this cabinet can get quite warm, particularly when the charger is running. So we want to ventilate as much of that heat outside of the cabinet as possible. And so that ventilation fan is there. So we need a fuse for that. So we fuse that inside this small fuse blade holder, and a couple other things like our cabinet lighting. So this is all rigid lighting, all of the highest componentry possible, a rigid scene light that envelopes and lights up our entire garage space. We have one of these on our water cabinet, as well as this one on the electrical, one on opposing sides and front and back. So we get a complete good lighting inside the garage space. So again, we're going to need a fuse for that light that would tie into there, and so on and so forth like that. So when we come along back over to this side, as I mentioned earlier, we have our MPPT, which is our solar controller. Our vans on the rack or the roof of the van get 180 watts of ZAMP solar Obsidian power through the Obsidian solar power cells or panel cells. And so that 180 watts of solar is going to be coming into our solar controller. It's at a higher voltage, so this modulates it down to a lower voltage so that our battery system can use it to charge. And above that, we have our 120 volt, basically a connector box or an electrical box. We tie in a couple circuits in our van, and we like to do that in a place that's accessible. And so we do that right here. Here we have our Bantam X S-Pod controller, which then ties into a digital control pad inside the build, and this is where all of our lighting gets controlled. So that we use the S-Pod. It's an off-road, robust system for controlling lighting or other componentry, but in this case, it's only for lighting, and everything is completely dimmable. We can turn everything on and off. We can group things together. We can dim them together. We have full capability over Bluetooth on our phones or via physical keypads. So we love the S-Pod products, and we use them in a couple places in our build, one in our exterior lighting, and obviously this one in our interior lighting. So all of our interior lighting will tie into the Bantam X S-Pod. And then I think outside of the end of this, which I'll bring you over to do, I think we've kind of hit most of the componentry, with the exception of, again, I'll maybe grab you for a second and bring you back. If we come over to here, you'll see there is our wake speed controller. And so our wake speed controller is, and this is a CAN bus wake speed controller. So this communicates very intimately with our BMS and with our battery system, and then obviously with the alternator itself. So it's kind of hidden in the back, but again, we've done it, so it's completely removable if for any reason we had to remove it. And then I'm going to take you around to the end panel. And so our end panel here, you can see we've got a couple things happening. On the top, we have all of our AC breakers. And so these AC breakers, we have our AC main, which we can turn on and off. They're all indicated lighting here. And then we have our circuits. So we've got 315s and 320 amp circuits for our main 30 coming in. So we've broken these up into water heater and outlets and microwave, stove, appliances, more outlets, things like that. Here we have our main power disconnect, and this is like a double hit kind of switch. So right now the system's on. I can't turn the system off. To turn the system off by bumping it or by mistake. To turn the system off, I have to actively slide the lever up or the slider up, and then I could turn the system off. So this prevents people from accidentally pressing something when they weren't wanting to or intending to do that. This little micro switch here, on-off switch, is for the backlighting of all of our labels. So these are lit up at night, so we get good visibility. These are the indicator on-off lights, which are 120 volt. These are 12 volt, so it comes with a separate switch. For 12 volt, we have a marine grade normal kind of outlet for the cigarette lighter style plugs, or the 12 volt plugs. And then we use what I feel are kind of the best 12 volt outlets in the business. These are made by Scanstrut. And what I love about these is they position themselves and the cap stays open. So you're not pinching your cords. You're not trying to hold it up with one arm, one hand and plug in with another. You can do it all with kind of in one simple motion. And what I like about this one, in this scenario, we use different ones throughout the build. But in this one, we've got USB-C and then our standard USB. So we've got kind of both, and these are both high capacity, so we get lots of flow through there. Here we've got our 120 volt plug, which will obviously be finished. It's currently not finished now because we don't have the wiring through from the van, but we'll have a screwless faceplate in a matte black that matches beautifully to everything else. And then we have here is our switching for our lighting. So if you recall, we have our lighting there, and we can turn those on and off. And we like a mechanical switch for that inside of our garage space. It's very simple to use. We're not fumbling to find our phone. We're not fumbling to go inside to try to turn it on and off. We can just have a quick, simple on and off via here. And so again, that's where something would be fused inside of one of our little blade fuse holders. And then the last component inside of here is a logoed emblem that's cut out, but this is strategic in that this brings an opening into the cabinet. So when our ventilation fan kicks on, and I'll show you where that is. So if we kind of look up inside there, you'll see the ventilation hole where the vent will stick down. And so once that kicks on, the doors are pretty well sealed. We're going to get a nice generous flow of air coming into the cabinet and then drawing all that energy or all that heat and air up through the cabinet and then expelling it outside. A couple of things I want to take you through to just highlight inside of this build or this cabinet structure is this also gives us structure for our entire garage. So it's not just to house our electrical components. Obviously, that's its critical focus. But it will then also, as you can see, we have these rivet nuts, and these are plus rivet nuts, so pre-bulb plus nuts. They're incredibly strong. And what we do is now these have been perfectly positioned so we can attach our heavy duty full extension sliders for our tray in our garage, and those bolt right through into the cabinet, giving us a really strong foundation for that slider. We use 500-pound sliders, so we can load up that cargo tray quite heavily, and it's all very structured through the cabinet itself. In addition to that, you'll see this is kind of the recessed area where the doors will fit. We use beautiful compression latches to attach the dooring system, and this thing will end up just specking out beautifully. Everything's bumpered. The doors stay open. They don't flop around. They're under kind of under a tension. And then even little things like you'll see there's 2 access holes here. Well, where we bolt this cabinet, we bolt it through to the floor of the van, and there are a couple spots here that are easily accessible. Well, these are not as accessible when you have to try to reach underneath here with something of a stubby socket, and then that one, the far one, gets really challenging to get at unless you have super long arms, which clearly I don't. So what we've done is we've drilled these out perfectly for the socket size so we can come in from the top. And then, of course, we send a plug to kind of finish us off beautifully. And then, as I mentioned earlier, our finish, our powder coating is exceptional. We don't cut corners anywhere when it comes to powder coating on any part of the van. And even in this case, this is an indoor piece, and this piece won't see any, rock chips and things like that. Obviously, it's going to be indoors. However, we don't treat this cabinet any different than we would treat any of our powder coating. This has This has been surface prepped. Now that is a mechanical surface prep, so it's actually sandblasted to prepare for a proper adhesion of the powder coating. It is then has an application of a primer powder that goes on first. In this case, this is aluminum, so we don't need a galvanizing primer, but it's a primer that's specific for aluminum. And then it's enveloped and just covered in 2 coats of powder. A lot of companies out there just simply slap on 1 powder coat of finished powder. They don't do a surface prep that's proper. They'll do an acid wash or a wipe, and you'll find your stuff is just flaking off. Sometimes you can actually just scratch it with your fingernail and it'll just come off. Or you hit one small rock and you end up with, you know, a big chip in it, and then it's right down to metal and it's rusting. If it's steel, in this case it's aluminum, so it wouldn't do that. But any of your exterior stuff, you know, we want to have this application so we don't cut corners. Even though this is inside, we treat it just as if it was going to be outside in the same. And as I mentioned earlier, all of the tracking or the Panduit concealment product is all been strategically placed. All of the cutouts would be there for you, so that we have a nice run for all of our componentry, and then all of the covers again would obviously be supplied, and so you end up with an exceptionally gorgeous finished product. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the next step of this is to do all the wiring. And the wiring is a big job. We need to properly gauge everything. We need to use the proper quality of wiring. Everything needs to be heat shrink wrapped. Proper crimping. So we use a hydraulic crimp press to crimp all of our lugs. We use all tin plated lugs, no raw copper. A majority of our wiring is all Anchor, multi-stranded tin plated wiring, with the exception of our 4/0 heavy gauge cabling. And we do that on purpose because we need it to be a bit flexible. And when you tin all of that, it gets kind of pretty rigid and not very nice to work with. So we can't get the nice bends. And because the cabling is so thick and heavy, we go with a welding style cable, which is the 4/0 cabling. However, again, we use a fully enclosed copper lug that's been tin coated, completely sealed, and then we use a generous amount of a heat shrink that has an adhesive lining to it that completely glues the inside. And so there's absolutely almost no chance that any sort of moisture or air would hit those copper strands inside that wiring, and hence no oxidation happening. So you can rest assured that what you have is here for a lifetime. You're not going to have any issues outside of any sort of component problems that sometimes do happen, but Victron is incredibly reliable. Everything can be diagnosed almost remotely through communication into the servo, because we have real-time connection to all of our pieces and our components. And as I mentioned earlier, everything inside here has been designed so that it could be removed and replaced. So even this multi-plus, you can see, that it's challenging to be able to get this piece out of here. And so it's within millimeters of where it can go to successfully get it off. Even accessing this end cover, whereas all our connections go, it's perfectly been designed so that we can access these 2 screws to get this cover off. So all those little things, you're not going to run into a situation where, well, how am I going to get that? Or, well, no, it's failed and I got to tear the whole thing apart. That will not happen. We've thought this through from the ground up. And so this is, again, an overview of our electrical assembly. It goes in all of our ultra premium builds here at Method Vans. And as I said earlier, we're excited that we are going to be hopefully offering in the near future this as a feature that you can purchase from us, that would get then shipped on a skid, obviously a longer skid than this one, but shipped on a skid and packaged so that when you receive it, you can simply place it in your van, bolt it down, bring your wiring in through here, and if you're doing alternator coming in through the bottom, you make your half dozen connections, and you went from a massive undertaking electrically to a simple and easy solution. the componentry is expensive, the cabinet is expensive, the powder coating is expensive, you know, the design time that took us to create and manufacture this product is expensive. So, you know, it's not a cheap piece, but I think once you would have it in your van, you would be incredibly proud of what you had as a final product. So what I will show you, one last thing before we leave, is I'll take you to the back of the cabinet because I want you to get an appreciation for the number of bolts that come through for all of the componentry. So as I mentioned, everything has been marked, pre-drilled, tapped, taken off, vacuumed, cleaned, component put on, you know, stainless steel hardware, lock washer, washer, attached, everything one at a time. And so that is a long process. So I'll grab the camera and I'll bring you around to the back so you can see what that actually looks like in terms of the magnitude of what we're seeing. So you can come around to the back here, you'll get a bit of an idea of the amount of penetrations that come through the cabinet. So obviously these heavy ones are for our multi-plus, those are quarter 20. So we use mostly 8/32 for all of our attachments, but then you'll see a number of the quarter 20s, which we use for some of our heavier componentry, for example, the multi-plus 2. Now, what we can do, because the van walls are curved, I don't find, you know, these don't really interfere, but it kind of depends on the length of bolts that you use. And so what we will often do, you know, it's kind of scary and feels bad doing it, but we will most often cut all of the heads off. It kind of makes a mess of the back of the cabinet, but this is against the van wall. It probably will never come out of the van. It's completely not visible. And so I just like the comfort knowing that these are completely sheared off and that there's absolutely no chance that they're going to be puncturing our silicone leather product or anything like that. But again, that would be up to you if you felt like you didn't want to have those cut off or not. As I mentioned, basically from the bottom of the van to up here, so it'll basically touch the wall panel up here, but then the van is curved, so we actually probably don't even have an issue with that. But anyways, that gives you a bit of an idea of how fantastic this cabinet is. And we also, I didn't mention that earlier, but we also use this structure to go from or flow from in terms of all of our interior cabinetry. So our bed wall actually attaches and is bolted to this cabinet. So the cabinet is very heavy. It's bolted to the floor of the van, and then all of our cabinetry inside the van flows off of this. Now, we obviously have our electrical side, and then opposing that on the other side of the van is our complete water system. So if you stay tuned and watch our upcoming video, I'll do a similar walkthrough. It's not as complicated. The water system's a little bit easier, thankfully, but I'll take you through our water cabinet that encases our water tank as well as our water distribution system and what makes that special. And then the two of them together give us our structure for our tray, as well our structure for our bed frame. So if you buy our bed panel system, our bed panel systems have been pre-marked. There's actually holes in the top of this where we'll bolt through to attach our two-panel bed system to. So it's a structure for the bed, it's a structure for the tray, it's a structure for our cabinets, and it really creates a solid foundation for everything that you're looking to do inside your van. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any more questions, shoot us a comment in the comments or get a hold of us at Method Vans. Website is methodvans.com. You can email us at info@methodvans.com. I'm the owner. I see everything. I do everything. Every part of the build I'm an integral part of, as well as my co-owner, my wife. She helps me a lot. So everything is hand-built by us, meticulous, and I can guarantee you're going to have an exceptional build when you come to Method Vans. Thank you very much, and thanks for watching.